What is the sin you would imagine I would hear confessed most frequently here at the CSC? I'm not going to ask you to start shouting those sins out. This could become an X-rated homily very quickly, I think, in that case. And the truth is, actually, the sin I'm going to share with you that I think I hear most confessed is probably triple X rated. Because likely the damage it does is way worse than most of the sins you were thinking of. One of the sins I hear most confessed here is judgment. Father, I'm always judging others. I have to say it is clear to me that at least in this culture, there is a tendency of the mind that is in all of us, and often. I'm not sure why that's true. If I had to guess, there would be some sort of evolutionary advantage, I guess, to making judgments. Being quick to judge perhaps will help us see, beware danger, so that we can live. And some of those quick judgments about what's dangerous would help us to choose what's healthy, so that we can live. And as a matter of fact, live at peak performance. But that evolutionary advantage, the ability to make quick judgments, has spilled over, and it's spilled into many other directions in our lives. And now it is clear that those judgments we keep making are getting in the way of our lives. They're impeding our ability to give and receive love, to get close to people, to trust another human being, to learn from somebody. And it's leaving us lonelier, these judgments do. They leave us lonelier and more restless, anxious. Those judgments become a quick and easy way to dismiss people, push them away from us. There's a Buddhist master who once said, you can spend your whole life contemplating the tendencies of your mind to label good and evil in all things. You can spend the rest of your life, he was saying, contemplating, thinking about this tendency in each of our minds to label good and evil, good and evil, good and evil all the time. And I assure you, that if we could observe this working of our minds, we would not be bored for a minute. The mind is always creating good and evil. The mind is always creating good and evil and sending messages to us in reaction to that judgment. This is good, we judge. This is bad. And so this becomes desirable, and this becomes undesirable. The activity going on all the time in our brains, it's all of our own invention. It's our own invention. It's fascinating to recognize that these actions are actually created by my mind. Good and evil do not exist in reality. They're created by my mind. Desirability and undesirability doesn't exist in reality. It exists in my mind. As a matter of fact, nothing that exists in the universe is just good or just bad. Somebody told us it was. Somebody along the way, probably especially our parents, convinced us that this is good, and this person is good, and this is bad, and this person is bad. But this week, I heard something different in the gospel. In this gospel than, as a matter of fact, I've heard over the years. That dividing of good and evil leads to a lot of judgments, quick judgments. And as a matter of fact, a lot of what we call racism or clericalism or sexism or any of the other isms and homophobia, I could go on and on talking about how those things begin to happen in us, through us, in the world because of these judgments we just keep making. They're insidious, these judgments are. Back to this gospel. Again, it's so rich. There's so many ways to hear it. There's so many places to stand inside this gospel. But again, what jumped out at me for the first time, actually, because I always kept focusing on that amazing, incredibly generous, passionate, erotic woman in that gospel, and that was an erotic scene, bar none, in the whole scripture, at least in the New Testament. God goes to the home of this Pharisee for dinner. Why? We really don't know why he went there. Perhaps to raise money for his movement. Perhaps because he liked the guy. Perhaps because he just was invited and he likes food. But this was beginning to be a wonderful event. There was a wonderful evening that was going on here. But something happened that spoiled it. This woman comes in who is identified by the culture as a sinner. She's a sinner, they've decided. We don't know what the sin was, actually. And so right away the host is starting to judge this woman. His mind is firing like a firecracker. He's starting to judge her, and his judgments are quick, and his judgments are fierce. She's a sinner. She's wasting money. What is she doing with all this erotic stuff in public? Women don't touch men in public around here. And these quick and fierce judgments must have brought that whole wonderful evening to a grinding halt. And here's Jesus sitting here. And he sees this all going on in this host's mind. And Jesus wants the host to see it in a different way. That maybe there's another perspective. Maybe you could stand over here, Simon, and look at it from over here instead of where you've always been looking at it through the lens of all these judgments. He saw it as all about mercy. He saw it as this amazing moment where this woman really understood what she had done had hurt people, and she wanted to be reconciled, and she wanted to make her life new again. And he saw her tears, and he knew it was for real. And so instead of seeing that, the host let what he judged so wrong with her, so wrong about her, he let it ruin the whole party. This woman risked embarrassment, and Jesus saw that. She risked this host's judgment on her. She knew this probably would happen, but her love won the day, and she did it. She demonstrated this intense affection and love. The judgments of the host ruined the night. The woman didn't ruin the night. Her past didn't ruin the night. Her crashing the party didn't need to ruin the night. It was the host's reactions. It was his judgments, his response. This is bad. This is undesirable. This isn't supposed to happen. He ruined his own party because of his judgment, not her. She didn't ruin it. When you and I start to track our judgments, you will notice that most of our judgments are actually ending up being almost all about us, really. They're very self-serving. They tend to lift us up. They tend to secure us in our place in this universe, and mostly at the expense of others, of other people. In that moment of judgment, when you and I are actually judging something in our brains, we're testing others and everything to see if that measures up. Do they measure up to our judgments about what is good and what is true and what is beautiful? Do they measure up to our judgments? Two great world religions, Buddhism and the religion of this Jesus you just heard about, called judgments a sin. Both of them teach that we have to learn in the spiritual life how to empty our minds of all these judgments. Our minds need to be emptied, they both teach, so that we can create a space for love to happen, so that we can create a space of openness for this other human being. Emptiness is a state of non-judgment. Both religions teach. Emptiness is a place of non-judgment. And when it is achieved, in those moments when we do empty our minds, we really end up brimming with joy that nothing can take away from. For sure, the judgmental thoughts are going to surface immediately at first. But just like what we were taught in grade school, most of us here, just like what they used to call impure thoughts, they're going to pop up naturally. The thought's nothing wrong with the thought in itself. It just happens. But we used to be taught, I remember the priest saying this to me in grade school, Gary, don't entertain those thoughts. But there's a wisdom there, because you know what? I can choose whether or not I entertain these judgments. The judgment's going to happen. I'm going to have that quick reaction. I'm going to try to put it in these orders of good and evil. But do I entertain that judgment? Do I take it forward, or do I just let it go? Those judgments are going to disturb me. They're going to get in my way. I can render those judgments mute and no longer be disturbed by them, and no longer have the space between me and this other person blocked by my judgment. It's kind of ironic, isn't it, that there's nobody here in this chapel, nobody, not a one of us, who hasn't been hurt by the judgment of others. We've been a victim like that woman was of other people judging us along the way. We know how awful it feels to be judged. And yet we let our minds do that to ourselves and others all the time. It's ironic, isn't it? Why would we hate being judged by others so much, having felt the pain of that, and then let ourselves do that to people all the time? And I hate especially, and again we know this because we've been judged, those judgments lock people into cages that they just can't get out because it's our judgment. I put them in there. I put them down. I rendered them impotent in my life. And that makes people slaves. And what's worse, we try to get other people to have the same judgments we have. We want people to think like we think. We want everybody to agree that when they hear the word Democrat or Republican or whatever the issue on the table is, whatever that person is like, whatever their orientation, whatever their gender, that they're all like that. We want allies so quickly. That's kind of putrid if you think about it. We tell other people how they should think too. I hear words like that. I hear words like that, like those key words that push our buttons in society, and the hair on the back of my head goes up. I'm ready to jump. I'm ready to judge. A few hairs I had that go. Like Jesus, like what happened to Jesus that night at that dinner party with his host and their friends. Our judgments are spoiling the party. Our judgments are spoiling this feast of life that has been set for us. The party of life. And they're ruining it. They're spoiling our lives. But I have to say, most of you know that. Or else you wouldn't have confessed it so often. You understand that. And far from being alarmed by the fact that that sin keeps coming up so often, I have to say as your priest that I'm extraordinarily edified that you get that. That you don't want to do that. And that you are working on it. During these warm summer days, I'm going to ask you just to spend a little extra time noticing the tendencies of your mind to label everything good or bad. To label people as good or bad. When do you do it? What are its effects on you when you do it? And what place does judgment have in your spiritual life? Trust me, if you do, it won't be a boring summer.